Welcome to the Peer Review Podcast, Cultivating Fulfillment and Creativity in Academia.
I'm Mira Sukharov.
And I'm Sarah Bunin Benor.
And this is our second episode. Each episode will bring us in conversation with fellow scholars and other experts on topics related to wellness in academia. We're starting off by interviewing each other about the ups and downs of our scholarly journeys.
We'll be talking about our values and our priorities, challenges we've faced along the road, and discussing how we aim to find meaning in our work.
Last episode, you, Sarah, interviewed me, Mira. Now it's my turn to ask the questions.
Okay, shoot.
All right. So start by telling us a little bit about your research. I mean, even your field, sociolinguistics, isn't necessarily obvious to people who haven't delved into that. So what is sociolinguistics and where have you carved your niche?
Sure. Sociolinguistics is studying the way that language relates to society and culture. And my focus within that has been Jewish sociolinguistics, the way that Jews speak and write, and how that correlates with various aspects of their identities and helps to construct various aspects of their identities. And most of my research has been about American Jews, especially their influences from Hebrew and Yiddish in the way they speak English. But I've also done some research on Jewish languages around the world, especially theoretical research about how to conceptualize those Jewish languages, and also theoretical research on language and ethnicity more broadly. My most cited work is a paper about ethno-linguistic repertoire, which reconceptualizes the way that we think about ethnic dialects into repertoires, that they're speaking the primary language with a repertoire of distinctive features that they can choose from consciously or subconsciously as they construct their identity as a member of that group. And then I applied that to Jewish languages, and I think of the way that Jews speak around the world is distinct from the non-Jewish correlate by a repertoire of distinctive Jewish features. And then another theoretical contribution that I've made is the concept of ethno-linguistic infusion, which relates to my second authored book, which is about Jewish summer camps. It's called Hebrew Infusion. And it's about how Jews in America use Hebrew-influenced English. They infuse Hebrew into the primarily English environment, not to teach Hebrew, but to foster campers' connections to Hebrew.
You're speaking my language. No pun intended. I mean, you know this about me, but one of the things that got me started in academia was my Hebrew summer camp. And I was so delighted to learn several years ago that camp, Camp Masad in Manitoba, features in your book as a site of ethnography. But I'm wondering whether you think we, as two Jews, are going to be doing any of these things today in this conversation, or do you think we have our universalist roles on so that we want to make sure that everyone understands us and we won't be falling into those insider ways of talking? I guess we'll see, but do you have any hunches?
I think we'll probably be more universalist in our orientation, and Jews, like any group, code switch. And when I'm speaking to you in a less public forum that isn't directed toward people of all different backgrounds, I would use more Hebrew words, more Yiddish words. But in these conversations, I don't expect that we will.
So maybe we'll have some outtakes later and others can see. Okay, so tell us about the jobs you've had, like your formal appointments.
Yeah, I have actually been in the same institution my entire career. I finished grad school in 2004 and started this job right away. I know that most scholars have bounced around a lot, and I've just been lucky to have a job that I like and feel like it's the right place for me all these years. So my roles have been assistant professor, associate professor, professor, and I also did a stint as vice provost for 3 years in 2021 to 2024. And I also started the Jewish Language Project, an initiative of HUC, in 2020. That actually combined a bunch of the projects that I had been working on for many years before that. And in my job at HUC, Hebrew Union College, I teach some rabbinical students and Jewish nonprofit management students at HUC. And then I also teach undergrads at the University of Southern California, our partner institution that is just across the street. So I teach undergrad classes on Jewish languages and Intro to Judaism. And I'm going to be doing a new one on Jewish names next year. And I do similar classes at HUC, but also classes on research methods and American Jewish language and identity and applied Jewish wisdom, that kind of thing.
So when you took the stint as vice provost, it's a lot different being in senior admin than being in the classroom. Did you have a full break from teaching, or it was greatly reduced?
Greatly reduced. My normal teaching load is 5, and then I had 2.
And what's it like? How do you find the difference in, let's say, satisfaction in a given week or month or year being in a senior admin position versus being more in the classroom?
Yeah, well, I guess the answer comes in my decision not to continue, right? They wanted me to do another 3-year stint, and I declined because I didn't feel as fulfilled. I didn't hate it. It was fun in some ways. Like I felt like I could make a difference in creating policies and working with faculty, but I didn't feel like it was the best use of my time, the best use of my training, my talent. So I I didn't feel as fulfilled as I do with my writing and my teaching.
Mhm. It's funny, we talk about this a lot as academics, unless you're, let's say, a professor of business or a professor of organizational management. When it comes to organizing and running a university, that is a job for academics, and we're not really trained to do it. So we're always sort of learning as we go, and in my own experience, it's been a big learning curve for me too. But it's interesting that you say that you don't find that's the best use of your talents. We're also often not taught enough about pedagogy as it stands in our grad school. Do you remember learning about how to teach?
A little bit, not that much. We learn how to research, and we don't even learn that much about how to write. But I do actually remember we had in my PhD program in linguistics at Stanford a class on the profession. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but as part of that, I think we probably got a little bit of training in pedagogy and a little bit of training in writing. And one of the things that stuck with me from that was from a professor, Eve Clark, who was also on my dissertation committee, who showed us how to write clearly. And she gave us examples. Don't say this, say this instead. You don't want to say things just to sound more academic. You want to sound more clear and concise. And that has really had an impact on my writing. And I've shared that with my students. But yeah, we're not trained much in pedagogy. And we're certainly not trained in public writing. We're trained in more academic writing. And we're definitely not trained in administration. I wonder if grad schools should consider offering a little bit of training in each of those, knowing that people who get their PhDs might go into those areas to some extent.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great innovation. When you look back over your career thus far, have there been any points that stand out as being particularly challenging?
Throughout my career, I've had various episodes of feeling more anxious. I have anxiety to some extent, and it's not severe. I've never taken medication for it, but it has been a challenge at various points. And it sort of it comes in waves. So it's not like I was more anxious at a certain stage in my career, because even now when I'm a full professor, I still feel that anxiety sometimes. But also, the idea of feeling scattered and unfocused, that's been a real challenge for me, because I do so many things and I often do them all at the same time. And it's hard for me to do just one thing, not just in a given day, but in a given 15-minute chunk, So that's been a challenge. I mean, I guess also, like anyone, I've gotten rejections. I've been rejected from many grants that I've applied for my own research and for the Jewish Language Project. But, that doesn't bother me so much because I know that they're all quite competitive and most people aren't going to get it. So you just have to go in with low expectations, but high hopes.
It's funny, this whole concept of rejection in academia, it's such a big part of our profession. And it is so hard. I'm moderately better at it now than I used to be. But it's funny, to me, there's always been two types of rejection. One is exactly the one that you mentioned. And that is when you're putting in for a grant, you know only whatever percentage of applications are going to be successful. And so chances are yours won't. Versus I've had the experience of having an editor really like a book manuscript proposal, and then the next draft, he says he doesn't like it anymore. Sometimes it's a she. So, and that sometimes feels much more stinging because that feels like dating, like where it's yours to lose almost. I don't know
Yes.
if if you've noticed that difference, or does one hurt you more, or are you just trying to work through rejection equally to thicken your skin in all cases?
Yeah, no, I guess that did happen once, not in being rejected, but when we submitted the full manuscript of a book that we had a contract for and got some very significant feedback that required significant revision, and that hurts. But I feel like I've really developed a thick skin over the years and gotten used to that kind of thing. You never submit to a journal and they say, yes, we accept that as is. There's always some revisions that you have to do, right? I remember actually my first revise and resubmit letter that I got, I found it was just too overwhelming and I never went back to that paper. It felt like it was too much for me to do. I don't even remember what they were. I probably didn't even read it closely enough because I was just too upset about it. But then over the years, I've gotten many of those revise and resubmits and I've gotten used to it. And now I just say, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to make my paper better and to learn more. Like recently, that happened with a paper that is going to come out soon in a journal. And I had to read several additional books to, make the changes that they wanted. And I liked that. I was like, wow, this is an opportunity for me to read these books that I've never read. And I didn't even know about some of them before. So that was really helpful for me.
And you've probably written a lot of those R&Rs too, those revise and resubmits as a reviewer as you get more years under your belt. So you know that it's nothing personal, so to speak, and it's part of the process. One thing we talk about, and you've mentioned this a little bit, is wanting to not do too much multitasking and try to fight those impulses. You were just talking about that. And one thing you and I've talked about before is productivity. It's this term. I mean, I know I have some ambivalence about it. Tell us about your take on productivity. Is productivity something you strive for? Is it something you want to push back on? If it is something you strive for, how do you try to improve it?
Hmm. So for me, productivity really is central to my sense of academic fulfillment and success. And I judge my success in a given day or week or month or year or in my career by how much I'm able to get done. And I don't mean necessarily creative output because projects often take a long time. And so even doing some of the legwork for a future article or book counts as productivity in my mind. I actually recently started working with an accountability partner. It was someone that I met through a mentorship program, and I was her mentor. And then shortly after our program ended, I said, do you want to be my accountability partner? And she said yes. And we were both so excited to do this. And it's been so helpful. Basically, we each email each other every Sunday and say what we got done the previous week and what our goals are for the next week. And we both have a lot of goals each time. And I would say maybe 2/3 of the time we accomplish everything that we've set out to accomplish, and 1/3 of the time we don't. And there's no shame in not accomplishing it. We give each other encouragement. And so for both of us, it's not just about, how many papers we can write or books we can finish, but it's also about little tasks that we have to do. And so actually, initially, when I was sending her my goals for each week, I would only include the research goals. And then gradually I started including more of the teaching tasks and service tasks. And eventually we both even started including non-academic things that we have to do, like planning a trip or helping an elderly parent. So it's been a really helpful way for me to not only be more productive, but to feel more productive. And actually, recently I had to submit a sabbatical reflection form because I just finished up a sabbatical. And the way I did it was I went through all the emails that I had sent to my accountability partner and saw all the things that I had accomplished during the 6 months of my sabbatical. And I was actually kind of surprised at how much I got done. It felt good.
Yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't thought of it till now, till as you were talking, that productivity can include things that don't just bring us glory and don't just add to the publication section on our CV, but might be emails we owe a graduate student on their thesis, stuff that's helping others. I mean, it's part of our job, but it's really there to boost others' career and help teach and shape. And I like your non-academic conclusions too, because that's part of life. One thing that you've done a lot with is, and I relate to this as well, is public engagement. So you've told us a little bit about the Jewish Language Project, but how it came about and who funds it. Do you fundraise for it? Does it help your career? How do you even count it? All that kind of stuff. Is it a labor of love?
Oh, wow. Okay, so let me take a step back to answer that. I remember a conversation that I had with a colleague, a phone conversation. I remember where I was standing. I was walking around my neighborhood and I was standing in a particular place. And I just remember like kind of pouring my heart out and saying how I felt like writing articles in academic journals is great and important for the field, but I want more. I want more people to read my work. I don't just want to be read by the, I don't know, 300 people who are going to read that article or whatever. So I started doing public engagement even when I was in grad school. And then I think at that time, after I had that conversation, I intentionally started doing more. I started the Jewish language website in 2002. It's jewishlanguages.org. And it is a repository of information about Jewish languages. Why did I start that? Because I had a pretty strong Jewish education, but I didn't know about all these languages. We had learned Hebrew and I had heard of Yiddish and even heard of Ladino, but I hadn't heard of Judeo-Arabic and Bukharian and Jewish Neo-Aramaic and Judeo-Greek and all these other languages. And so I made it my goal to research these languages and to raise awareness about them. And I did that through my own research, but also through my public engagement. And the website was one part of that. And then eventually I expanded to add many other resources, like the Jewish English Lexicon, which is an online crowdsourced dictionary of the words from Hebrew, from Yiddish, and other languages that Jews use when they're speaking English. We have over 3,800 entries right now, and anyone can add an entry and suggest an edit to an entry that's there. There's recordings. All of this has been a labor of love, like you said. And it's the kind of thing that I do for fun, but it's also part of my job. I mean, I guess I consider much of my job to be fun. Maybe not as much the teaching and the service, but definitely the research and the public engagement I think of as things that I usually enjoy. So I spend a lot of my time working on the Jewish Language Project. We also have curricular materials. And in addition to this podcast, I have a podcast called Heritage Words. And in each episode, I interview somebody about an ancestral language that they have a connection to, but don't fully speak. And that's been so rewarding. And I've realized that I really love interviewing people. So that's another reason that I'm excited about this podcast that we're doing together. And also you asked me about funding. It's funded by individual donors. So we've gotten some major donations from particular individuals and foundations, and also just small donations from website visitors, podcast listeners, people who find our work important and think that it's worth donating to. And we have gotten a few grants that we've applied for, but most of the rejection that I was talking about was grants that we applied for the Jewish Language Project. Like we applied to one particular organization 7 times and still haven't gotten it.
So tell us a bit about what a perfect day, a perfect work day is for you.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, but I have to include other things besides work in my perfect work day because academics, unlike someone who goes to an office from 9 to 5, don't have that clear boundary between their work and the rest of their life. So when I say my perfect workday, I have to include other things. So, okay,
Go for it.
here it is. Waking up around 6 a.m. and doing work at my computer right away for a few hours, with some breaks to say good morning to my children. I have 3 children, ages 17, 20, and 22. And so, I'm spending a little time with whoever's awake in the morning, and then eating breakfast around 9 a.m., and then doing a little more work, and then going to exercise for, I don't know, maybe a half hour or 45 minutes, taking a shower, and then doing more work. And when I say work, I mean research related work. My mornings are really supposed to be devoted to that. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's my ideal. And then really not even opening my email until 3 o'clock p.m. because as soon as I open my email, I feel like I'm going to be stuck on there the rest of the day dealing with whatever's in the inbox. When I'm just doing my research, I'm in control. I can decide what I want to focus on, what I want to write about, what I want to read. But as soon as my inbox is open, that is the end of my work day for my research part of my work. And then it's more about my teaching, my service, and especially the Jewish Language Project.
Okay, and you said you included non-academic things in your day, so exercise, saying hi to your kids.
Yeah. Oh, and I also, so I actually blocked out on my calendar things to do every day, every morning before I get out of bed, some deep breaths. That's very important for me to feel relaxed during the day. And exercise is also very important. But then also on my calendar, it says something joyful every evening at 8 o'clock. And I don't always do it exactly at 8 o'clock, but I actually try to not do anything work related after like 6 or 7 p.m. And so, making dinner is a big part of my perfect day because I love to cook. And I love how you're using a different part of your brain and your body is in a different position than you are most of the day at your computer, which gets back to what you said in a previous episode about the absent-bodied professor. That really stuck with me, because I feel like we could be absent-bodied. And so for me, the deep breaths, the exercise, and the cooking are a big part of not feeling absent-bodied and feeling like I'm using different parts of my brain and using my body in ways that are healthy beyond just sitting in one position all day. Oh, and also
Yep.
taking breaks. I try not to work for more than an hour or an hour and 15 minutes without getting up and walking around. And so part of my perfect working day includes, just walking around the house and maybe tidying up a little for 3 minutes in between those hour-long chunks of working. And then I guess an ideal day, I would also get some kind of external affirmation that my work is having an impact, either like an article being accepted or being invited to speak somewhere, or someone contacting me and saying that they read something that I wrote or something like that.
And let's talk a bit about collaborations. Tell us about times where you've had successful ones.
Sure. I've done a lot of collaboration, mostly in editorial work. I am a co-editor of the Journal of Jewish Languages, which my colleague Ofra and I founded. And we have been the editors for the last 13 years. And so that's a big collaboration, but we also collaborate with other people like on the advisory board and editorial board, and the authors and the reviewers and the copy editor and the publisher. So there's a lot of collaboration that happens there. I also have co-edited a volume and some thematic issues of journals with various people. And I have co-authored several articles and one book where it's by me and two co-authors. And I would say throughout all of my collaborations, they've mostly been fruitful and good. And I was glad that I collaborated. There are always things that are bothersome or could be improved, like different writing styles, different working styles, different orientations toward the analysis that you're doing. It's so much easier to work alone, but it's less fruitful. Like, I think you bounce ideas off of each other, and when you're collaborating with someone, you end up having a richer analysis than you otherwise would. Some of the collaborations I've done have been initiated by others and some by me, and I'm really glad that I did all those things. I think academia can be quite lonely if you don't collaborate. Like, if I was just sitting at my computer writing all day, I mean, that would feel like an ideal day, but if it happened multiple days in a row, it might not, because I might feel lonely and like I wasn't getting that kind of social interaction that I need.
And certainly there's much more expected collaboration in some fields, particularly in STEM and lab type settings. And we don't have that. For us, collaboration in the social sciences is more of a choice that you avail yourself of. So I'm wondering what you would say to graduate students or junior faculty that you've learned, or how to get going on a more fulfilling path earlier than they might otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I have sort of built up this list of hacks that have been really helpful for me. And one of them I actually just came up with a name for in the middle of the night last night, when most of my ideas come to me when I'm trying to stay asleep, which is actually another challenge, is insomnia. Like, I don't have trouble falling asleep, but staying asleep is a little harder. Like, I often wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I have all these thoughts about my research and ideas, and so that's been kind of tough, but it's not terrible. So the phrase that I came up with in the middle of the night last night is mode switching. So we have code switching, and then we have mode switching. In linguistics, code switching can be either situational or intrasentential. And there's other types too, but situational code switching is when you use one language with one person or in one situation, and a different language with another person or in a different situation. And intrasentential code switching is when you switch within the middle of a sentence. And that has now been also reconceptualized as translanguaging, where people who are bilingual just mix languages without necessarily indicating that they're switching to another language. And for them, it's just one system that we think of as two separate languages, but they just think of as language. And so I think about that in relation to doing my work. I could translanguage, meaning I could do one task for a minute and then another task for another minute. And that's often how I end up working. And that isn't good for me. It makes me feel unfocused, and it makes me feel less productive. And I don't do as well with any of them. Whereas if I do one task for a given amount of time, for, let's say I'm going to try to do this for an hour, just this task, then that is better for me. So mode switching, meaning you're in the mode of doing that task, and then you go into the mode of doing another task, but also more broadly, mode switching from work to no work. And so for me, that happens every week on Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, where I stop working on Friday evening. I'm not religiously observant in that I can't use electronics after sundown, and I'm not always strict about the time I start, but I always try to have at least 25 hours away from my work, which is especially away from my email. So I'm pretty strict about not checking my email on Shabbat. And so that's mode switching, right? I'm switching from work mode to no work mode. Same with vacations. A lot of people are constantly checking their email on vacation. When I'm on vacation, I try not to check my email. And that is actually a time when I do more pleasure reading, because I find it difficult to do pleasure reading when I'm not on vacation, because I just feel like I'm reading all day, and then I don't have the mental stamina to read for pleasure in the evenings. So mode switching from work to vacation. So mode switching, that's one piece of advice that I would have for young scholars, which I think is really important, not just scholars, but people who aren't in an office job, a 9 to 5 job, when their time is flexible and they're in control of it, then it helps to take more ownership over when you're working and when you're not.
Now, I do have to ask the 6 a.m. wake up, given that for me that is an ungodly hour, but you've suggested it might be similar for you because you're up in the middle of the night at times. Is it hard to wake up at 6? Are you forcing yourself to do that so that you
Oh
become
my
more
God.
productive?
No, I haven't set an alarm for years, except like if I need to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to the airport or something. But no, it's not hard at all. I naturally wake up around then and have trouble sleeping later than that, even on the weekends. I go to bed early. I try to be in bed by 10. Sometimes I sleep in, but it's not a problem for me. So other hacks, yeah, I guess a little meditation. I haven't really been great at it, but I practice and I try to do it about once a week. Um, let's see. Oh, here's another hack. Saying no. That's tough. You make decisions about what to say yes and no to. And this is especially important in service, internal and external service. I think it's important for us to distinguish between internal and external service. I don't feel that I can say no to most internal service things because I have a small institution, and if I say no, then someone else has to do it, But for external service, there are many people out there who could say yes if I say no. I just today said yes to reviewing a submission to a journal. I'd say I do maybe like 5 of those per year, but I often say no. And I get these requests all the time. And so when I get the request, the way I make that decision is whether I would want to read that article anyway. And if it's something that's really out of my area of expertise, even if I'd want to read it, I would say no. And if it's something in my area of expertise, but I really wouldn't want to read it, then I'll say no. Or if I'm just so overloaded, even if I'd want to read it, I might say no. But I always suggest a few additional reviewers that they could ask.
And I'm
Um,
sure your friends are very appreciative of that.
well, they don't know that I was the one who suggested that. Don't tell them. Oh, wait.
No,
Okay.
no.
So yeah, so saying no. Also, finding people to help me with things that I find tedious or that maybe aren't the best use of my time. For example, formatting a bibliography. I would sometimes hire a research assistant to do that, even if I've run out of my research funding for the year and have to pay a little bit out of pocket. I still think it's worth it. And now with the AI tools available, using AI tools that can help you with that kind of thing. Yeah.
And maybe next time we can talk about something else we've talked a little bit about in terms of career, work-life balance and career meaning, and that is the question of spirituality.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
is that part of the way you try to design your academic life?
Interesting. I hadn't really thought about my academic life as being spiritual until I started working with a spiritual director. Now that sounds woo woo, but it's sort of like a therapist or a coach, but with a spiritual orientation. And this was a service provided by my institution. Originally, it was for rabbinical students, but then they made it available to anyone who teaches rabbinical students. And I said
Oh.
yes. And at the time, I had been working with a therapist, and I decided to stop working with the therapist and just work with the spiritual director. And it's been amazing. We've been working together for almost 2 years, and I found it so useful. I basically bring up things that I'm thinking about, and then she helps me think about them with a spiritual orientation, like what brings meaning to my life. Through those conversations, I've really learned a lot about what animates my academic work that is also what animates a lot of things in my life, which is creativity and sharing things with others. And I realize that's the case with academia too, that so much of what we do is solitary, but has an audience in mind. And so for me, sharing my research, whether through academic venues or more broad audience venues, is really important for my sense of fulfillment. So creativity and community are really important for me. Also, entrepreneurship. I mean, that sounds like the opposite of
I
spirituality.
was just thinking that, talk about mode switching, but I know that you're going to make an interesting connection between the two. So I'm all
Yeah, I
ears.
mean, it's like if you see a gap in the world and you know that you have the skills to fill that gap, I sort of feel like you're obligated to do that. I mean, not everyone. I feel like I'm obligated to do it. I sort of feel a compulsion to fill those gaps. And so I've done that mostly related to my actual expertise in sociolinguistics and onomastics, the study of names. But I also have been doing that in other random areas. Like, I don't know anything about computational linguistics and AI, but I feel the need to be involved with that world, not through actually doing the work, but through working with others to get that work done, because the tools are available and I see a gap in the world and I feel like I can use those tools to fill that gap. Or another example of that, so my grandmother was 98 years old in 2016. She has passed away since then, but she asked my mom to take a picture of her holding up her absentee ballot for voting for Hillary Clinton. And she said she was so excited that she was born before women had the right to vote, and now she was voting for the first female president. And I posted that on Facebook, and it very quickly got a lot of attention. And I realized that this is a gap that I feel called to fill, to compile similar pictures and thoughts from women who are also 96 years or older, because women in the US mostly got the right to vote in 1920. And so in 2016, they would be 96 years or older. And a colleague and I did this, and we compiled those thoughts from 188 women, and we created a website. It was called I Waited 96 Years, and then edited a book with their wisdom after Hillary lost the election. And it was their advice for the country moving forward. It was called We the Resilient, Wisdom for America from Women Born Before Suffrage. And so this is an example of, like, I do think of this as spiritually fulfilling in a sense, that even though it's entrepreneurial, right? I saw a gap and I felt the need to fill that, even though it wasn't my area. You know, I'm not a gerontologist. I'm not a historian. I mean, I guess I am kind of an editor, but I am a social entrepreneur in that way. And I felt like there was this need, and I felt called to fill it.
That's a really moving story. And how I think it sounds to me like, even though, as you said, it's not your direct discipline, your personal connection really galvanized you, seeing your grandmother and your grandmother's own vision for how she felt about it. So that's fantastic. I love that story. That's a wonderful note to end on, I think, as we think about transferring our wisdom to those coming up behind us on that tenure track ladder, and those looking for jobs and training. And I'll look forward to the next conversation we get to have together.
Amazing. Thank you so much. The Peer Review podcast is produced and hosted by Sarah Bunin Benor and Mira Sukharov. Talia Ehrenberg is assistant producer and editor. The music is written and performed by the Galactic Ambassadors. Support for this podcast comes from a faculty grant from Hebrew Union College. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can reach us at peerreview@huc.edu. You can join the conversation on Facebook at Peer Review, Cultivating Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. Thank you for listening.